Sandro Tonali. I have no words for that goal. That's up there. That could be goal of the season. And the mad thing is, I think he meant that. Like just the way he strikes the ball. I'm 90% sure he meant that, and he was like, "The keeper's there. I'm gonna catch him out." Waff! And what a goal that was, and what a way that was for Newcastle to beat Brentford 2-1. A very good result for Newcastle because Brentford are a good side. They're a difficult side to beat. And Newcastle, for me, deserved the win in the end. I think there was a couple opportunities Brentford had very late on as Newcastle sat back a little. But I thought Newcastle put in a very good second half performance and deserved the win. They did enough. I thought Livramento had a very good game again. I thought Joe Linton had an underrated game. He did a lot of good work. I thought Tonali was excellent. Murphy, again, shows importance. I thought Barnes was impactful as well. He's not as good as Anthony Gordon was impactful. Isak shows his quality yet again. But this puts Newcastle in fifth in the Premier League with a game in hand, by the way, which could take them to 53 points, which would put them fourth place in the Premier League. Obviously, with Bournemouth dropping points and Chelsea have just fallen off a bit recently, that gives Newcastle huge advantage in this race for Champions League football, not just Europa League, European. Sixth and seventh can get Europa League, fifth gets you Champions League. Champions League, this is Newcastle getting back into it because they've got Leicester, you expect them to win. They've got Man United. As a Manchester United fan, I'm not confident. Palace are in much better form, although they did drop points to Southampton. Aston Villa will be a difficult game. Ipswich, you expect them to win. Brighton is always a difficult game, but they've not been as good this season. Chelsea have fallen off a bit. Arsenal, Newcastle have seemed to beat them 3 times this season, and Everton at the end, which that Everton will have nothing to play for in that sense. So I look at it, and if you compare that to the fixture list of a Chelsea or a Manchester City, I think that Newcastle have got a good run of fixtures. They are fifth in the league with a game in hand. And I know the form dropped off a bit, but I think the win and the momentum from that cup win could go into the next game. They're clearly a confident side under Eddie Howe, and maybe they do get Champions League football. So let's talk about Newcastle 2, Brentford 1, and what we learned from the game. So Newcastle played well in my opinion, and I think they deserve to win. I think it was a good second half performance, especially after going 2-1 up. I think, I feel like Newcastle's still a bit of a confidence side. Sometimes they're better when they score. Sometimes they're worse when they concede. Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes when they win 1 or 2 games in a row, they look really much better after it. And I felt that they did create some attacking, I say several attacking dangerous moments, but they also did give Brentford a few chances late where Pope had to make some good saves. But I felt that Newcastle brought that element of threat, particularly in that second half. There was even an opportunity that Wilson had that maybe he could have done better with. But as I said earlier, this is just a big win for Newcastle, particularly in this Champions League race, and it puts a lot more pressure on someone like Chelsea, who were trying to compete for that Champions League spot. The one thing I will say is if Newcastle don't get Champions League football, it's not the end of the world, because I think you've still got issues in terms of squad depth. I think obviously having to sell Minter and Alec Anderson, hasn't helped. But you need, obviously, that centre-back. You need a right centre-back and you need a right winger. You need a centre-back and right winger. They're the 2 positions you need. But you could argue Newcastle probably need another body at centre-back. Sorry, it's another body in the midfield, just for depth if you're going to be in Champions League next season. Because Tonali, Bruno Guimaraes and Joe Linton are great, but Willock's been hit and miss. Lewis Miley's incredibly young. You probably need another body in that midfield. Wilson's going to go. I guess Mbeumo can play centrally, but maybe you want someone, because I don't think he trusts ECILA to be back up to Isak, and because it's a big drop off from Isak to ECILA, and potentially you need another centre back, or at least someone, or someone for fullback cover, because Trippier is aging, and potentially a goalkeeper as well. I think you've been linked to James Trafford. So the other thing is, if Newcastle did somehow drop off and get Europa League, it won't be the end of the world, because it's still good competition to be in. I like the Europa League. Man United are in there. I've always actually quite liked the Europa League, which Man United fans don't like, but I do. I think it's a good competition. But I think Newcastle will get Champions League. But that's all I'm saying, is there'll be a bit of work to do this summer in terms of depth, and you want some luck with injuries, because I think, if you struggled last year, even though you beat PSG in Champions League, and I wouldn't say you struggled too much in the Champions League, I think you were unlucky to be knocked out. I think you got like a dodgy handball against you versus PSG. I can't remember what it was. But you struggled the second half of that season. You started with the injuries. That's what I will say. I think depth is an issue that Newcastle will have to look at. But I think you will keep Bruno Guimaraes. I think you will keep Isak, and I think you'll probably keep Gordon as well. The only case scenario is, would they maybe look at selling one of those players if it meant they would have a much bigger budget to spend elsewhere? I'm not sure. Isak, I don't think is going anywhere. I've heard the Newcastle owners like nowhere. As much as Arsenal fans think they're going to get Isak, David Ornstein said it's probably not going to happen, and he's a very good journalist. Bruno Guimaraes, I think if he would have gone, it would have been last year, and he didn't go, and he clearly left Newcastle. And I can't see Gordon going. I can't really see any of their key players leaving. I saw Liverpool fans saying that they want to sign Lewis Hall, but look, that's not going to happen. He's not going to go anywhere. I think Liverpool signed Kirk, so I think they will hold on to some of their key players. But I do think this is a big win for Newcastle. But let's talk about this guy, Sandro Tonali. So I said the other day, I think he's having one of the most underrated seasons in the Premier League. We spoke about Gravenberch at the start of the season and just how good he was, at Liverpool at the start of the season. But I think he's been a bit exhausted and dropped off lately. We were also talking a little bit about, Casado. I think he's been Chelsea's best player this season. And then I said, Tonali makes my top 3 DMs. I put Tonali, Gravenberch and Casado in my top 3 DMs this season. A few Arsenal fans got annoyed, didn't put Declan Rice in. But I think Tonali, not only does he make Bruno Guimaraes better, but I think what he's done and the impact he's had on Newcastle this season is massively going under the radar. It's not just because he scored a goal. These are my notes on Tonali from January. I did a video and talking about Tonali in January, and I said this: disrupts attack, he disrupts transitions with ease, and he asserts physical dominance. His reading of the game and ability to protect space during transitions stood out. On top of his high pressing, work rate, technical abilities on the ball make him a top profile. In other words, what that means is, in the Premier League, you've got to be physical. You've got to be able to deal with the physicality of the Premier League. Some players come to Premier League and struggle. Tonali can cover ground with ease. He's a monster. He's an athletic monster. He's physically strong. He's physically good. He can deal with the athletic levels of the Premier League. But also, you need to have an element of technical ability to be a DM and progress the ball. And he brings that technical ability, whereas Longstaff was quite good physically, but he lacked technically. Tonali brings that technical security, but also that intelligence in terms of positional sense. And because he's got a bit more defensive security, Bruno Guimaraes can play further up. Bruno playing as an 8 shows that Bruno can, be aggressive, press, show elements of his creativity, which is Bruno's best position, and I think he makes the players around him better. I think Tonali is, after Isak, is almost Newcastle's most important player in terms of that system. Maybe they need someone that, that can also play there, or another body in midfield for depth, because you don't want to run him to the ground. But his positioning, his mobility, his reading of the game is so good in terms of his defensive side, but also going forward, he has an impact. The ball strike and the goal was absolutely fantastic player. And I think his influence has really elevated Newcastle this season. I think, him coming back from his ban has been huge. And I think, him having the technical ability that a Longstaff had lacked, as well as the physical ability, means that he can play against the big sides, and he can also play against the sides where you're going to have to unlock those low blocks. He's fantastic. So big shout out to Tonali's having one of the most underrated seasons. These were just other general notes. Isak scores again, world class. The goal was brilliant team play. Even I think he set Harvey Barnes up for the goal that was ruled out. Even that was really good team play. Tonali strike, just top class. Individual brilliance, that's what it was. Isak's was a world-class team goal. It was a fantastic team goal. Murphy, the ball, Isak. And I have to say, Jacob Murphy's really stepped up this season. And one thing he does is he always puts those good crosses into Isak. He's got a connection with Isak. He really goes under the radar. I thought Joelinton had a strong game. He broke up play, won the ball, he drove forward, created chances. I thought his pass to Wilson was really good later in the game. I thought Barnes was lively. He's not as good as Gordon, but I think he made an impact today. He was threatening. I think he's unlucky not to score. Wilson was better today, but he's not the Callum Wilson of 2-3 years ago. His injuries have clearly taken a toll. And I thought Livramento had a good game. He stepped up a lot lately, and I think he's looked better on the left at times, works hard, deals with wing as well. I thought Livramento was good. But we've quickly got to have a chat about this guy, Isak. I couldn't do a Newcastle match reaction without talking about Isak. If you're wondering why, that's because literally every game he's good, and literally every game he scores. And he's just, he's just a monster. His ball striking, unbelievable. His dribbling, the way he can dribble the ball, touch, play the ball, wow, really good for a striker. Hold up play, good. Positioning, good. There's nothing Isak can't do. He's £150 million for a reason. And I don't think anybody's going to get near him. I don't think anybody is going to get near him, because he's so good. He's worth 150 million. He can be a transition threat. He can help you break down low blocks. He can score with his head. He can score with his feet. He can run with the ball. He can tap it in. He can score worldies. There's nothing Isak can't do. And I'm always blown away with just how good Isak is. Anyway, thank you for watching. Newcastle fans, do let me know your thoughts down below. I'm now going to record a match reaction on the Liverpool game, which I thought was quite a boring game. They beat Everton 1-0. And then if I get time and don't fall asleep, I might do a match reaction on the Villa game, because I was watching quite a lot of games at once. Obviously, there was bits of the games I zoned out. So I'm sorry if this wasn't my most detailed match reaction, but I was like watching 3 different games at once and looking at this and looking at that. But Marcus Rashford, Asensio, yeah, I might do a Villa match reaction as well. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching. Bye.